Obama in a certain light, and the reality is he hasn't delivered on the hope and change that he's talked about. Like, there are a lot of people in the peace movement that figure for all that money that America spends on war, that could probably alleviate all the poverty in the world. So if there's any dialogue that could be mentioned about the alternatives, given that, I don't know, a few Americans think that there's going to be like a worldwide earthquake this Saturday, and like the end of the world's going to come in October and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering what's in the Kool-Aid in America.
Okay, two last speakers, and then I promise I come back to the panel. The comrade from the BT.
Yeah, I'm Josh. I'm a member of the International Bolshevik Tendency. On the BDS campaign, I think that the BDS campaign has been successful in popularizing the concept of the apartheid and things like that, and it's really shone a light on what's going on in Israel-Palestine. But I think it's not a campaign that revolutionary socialists should be advancing. It really is based on a perspective of pressuring corporations and imperial governments in Canada and the U.S. to act better, to act in the interest of the Palestinians. And I think that's a fundamentally flawed conception, and one that we should not be embracing, while at the same time, of course, doing everything we can to further the cause of the Palestinian people and the struggle for liberation.
Barry?
Well, I would like to ask Chris to elaborate a bit on the origins of the United National Anti-War Committee. Mind you, there's someone else in the room who may want to say a few words about that too, because he was integrally involved, but I'd love to hear Chris describe why it was necessary to bring together the forces that were involved in some other movements, like United for Peace and Justice, that had not done the job. With respect to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, that campaign is actually designed to tie the hands of corporate capitalism, to tie the hands of those who profit from apartheid in the Zionist state. And it's for that reason, and not because of some liberal notion of getting the corporate elite to behave differently, that we support the BDS campaign, and proudly so. And you know, it's kind of a shame, I guess it's a lesson too, that the one international campaign that has most attracted support from unions, from municipalities, from broad mass organizations around the world for the just cause for self-determination for Palestine does not have the support of some small socialist organizations. I think it's shameful, and I think it's time that we sort of get involved in promoting the one campaign that has had the biggest impact in raising public awareness internationally for the justice of the Palestinian cause. As Trotsky said many years ago, nationalism is the envelope of the social indignation of workers of oppressed nations. There's nothing wrong with, in fact, it's a duty of progressive people, let alone socialists in the oppressor countries, to identify with and solidarize with the national aspirations of oppressed peoples and oppressed workers. And it's a shame when there are some amongst us who don't. With respect to April 9th, we made some small steps forward here. We contributed to a debate that produced the first street demonstration against Canadian intervention in Afghanistan for 3 years in this city, and it was able to join a much larger demonstration at Dundas Square on April 9th to protest the agenda of the new right-wing mayor in Toronto, Rob Ford, and that was a good step forward. But we need more standalone, dedicated actions to the anti-war cause in this country, because Canada is involved. The Canadian corporate elite and the Canadian military are involved right up to their eyebrows in the oppression by the Western powers that is taking place all across North Africa, the Persian Gulf, and the Arabian Peninsula. And that involves not only position of the Harper government and the predecessor governments with respect to cutting off aid to the Palestine Authority, or aid through an eyedropper before that, but particularly in the intervention in Afghanistan and now in Libya, or off the shores of Libya, because it's a Canadian General, Charles Bouchard, who is in charge, who is the commander of the NATO forces, which are dropping tons of bombs on Libya, and not because they want a progressive democratic republic, but because I think they're aiming for partition. They want to get the best deal they can get from the rulers that they can install in Benghazi and the ones they can deal with perhaps at the end of the day in Tripoli for the benefit of Western corporations, including, for example, SNC-Lavalin. SNC-Lavalin is one of the biggest engineering firms in the world, involved in building up the apartheid road network through the West Bank, Jewish-only roads through the West Bank on Palestinian land, building a modern high-security prison in Libya until recent events interrupted that enterprise, involved in construction of roads and major buildings in Haiti. And they have designs on big profits across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. My time's up, so I'll just leave it with that question and the position that Canadian capitalism has to be confronted, and not just through words, but in deeds as well.
Thank you, Gauvreau. Okay, so we're coming back to the panel, and we'll start with Christine, and 6 minutes each.
It certainly is.
For 14 questions.
I'm trying to.
Okay, you can have 8 minutes each. Jeff has spoken.
All right, let's see. So, on Obama's speech today, with regard to Palestine, this was if you didn't hear it, you must listen to it very soon. It surpassed his last Cairo speech in just the sheer arrogance and, kind of swashbuckling character of it. I mean, calm and polite, of course, but he basically said, just a few days after the sort of glorious Nakba Day activities, he said, this must end. There must be a solution, and I'll get to the interpretation. There must be a solution because the threat, basically he said everything can unravel. There must be a solution. And I want to tell you, Palestinians, don't even think about organizing a symbolic action for the UN in September and think that it will matter to us, that we will accept it, and do not imagine, that you can continue to try to delegitimize the state of Israel. I mean, those were basically almost his exact words. So, yes, of course, he said Israel must stop the settlements. He knows that that has to be done. He knows that discussions must go on before there's any further discussion of East Jerusalem and the right to return. But basically, what is his intention? The intention is to do something to undermine the great advances we're making in delegitimizing the state of Israel through campaigns like BDS. I want to say, and responding to the tremendous advance in terms of understanding of the total inadequacy of this two-state perspective that Obama's putting forward, and the impossibility of creating any kind of sovereign, viable state for the Palestinians. So the idea, I believe, is to to put pressure on the Palestinians in advance of what they see as a possible propaganda coup in the September actions. We have to keep up the campaign. We should read his speech as indicating that we have had an effect, that they are in great fear of seeing new blows against Israel and its legitimacy, and that we should press on. In terms of BDS, I just want to say to Josh, I once had your position, so I understand it, and I think that those of us in the workers' movement, have a traditional see the weaknesses of boycott campaigns, see them as passive and consumerist campaigns, and so forth. The truth is that BDS is not being organized that way. There are many ways to do BDS. Port actions in California have been considered BDS campaigns, and so forth. I think that it has the great merit of uniting very disparate parts of the movement and we can organize the sorts of actions within it that we can think are the best. In terms of the national struggle in Palestine, I think that the perspective that you put forward is totally lacking in viability. I don't know if you've been in Palestine, but the workers of Palestine who function in groups in parts of Fatah, in parts of Hamas, and other organizations have lived through 30 years of being asked to be in, quote, collaborative organizations with Israelis and Israeli workers, and every single episode has been used to delegitimize their struggle and give authority, give some sort of legitimacy to Israel's narrative of the events. I actually went there once to do a labor solidarity mural, which was built on Zachary Lachman's story of attempts to collaborate between Jewish and Palestinian workers in Haifa and the Great Railroad Strike before. And I have to tell you, I had a million political discussions with folks on both sides of the Green Line who almost all found, other than a handful of Trotskyists, found that to be a political project they found it almost impossible to associate with. The national question has to be solved before there can be any unity with Israeli workers. The great solution to the Palestinian question lies in the revolutionary action of the Egyptian workers, and them creating a new society in Egypt may have the power to win some layer of the working class in Israel to see that their fate should be tied up in a socialist working class Middle East. But we're not close to that. And so we need to privilege the defense of the right of self-determination for Palestine. I'm sure, am I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. In terms of, so many questions. Should I stop and then?
No, you
Yeah.
guys just still got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, great.
I've added some to your time.
Just in terms of the extrajudicial assassination of bin Laden, I have to tell you that the response of there was a layer of the liberal political organizations in the U.S. who applauded that, and it was a great relief, thought it was a great relief, and then went on to say, of course, the war should end. The vast majority of the U.S. anti-war movement, the peace and social justice movement, however, immediately responded and said, this assassination is simply an attempt of the United States to tell everyone in the Arab Spring and the rest of the Middle East that they're still the boss, they can do whatever they want, they can assassinate whoever they want, to increase jingoism, pro-war sentiment. You know, the war in Afghanistan is opposed, but now by the majority of the American population, and this was an important effort to kind of rekindle war fever, and most importantly, in the sense of dividing the American population in anticipation of advanced war and greater attacks on the U.S. working class, it has been a moment to relaunch and rekindle a major attack on Muslim Americans. There was just a report issued that gives us some sense of the terrific efforts the U.S. government is going to demonize the Muslim American population, a great percentage of which is African American, of course, in the United States. They actually have used government tax dollars to hire a range of right-wing consultants who they've hired to train law enforcement officers all around the country. These include people like Walid Faraz, former phalangist from Lebanon, explaining that Muslim is a demonic religion, that moderate Muslims are using the law to secretly support terrorism in the United States, that everybody is, etc. And there's a lot of armed people in the United States, and they're all under arms in the law enforcement community, and this is the training that they're receiving. So it gives you an idea of how important Islamophobia is to the U.S. ruling class in terms of dividing the working class and pursuing these wars. In terms of, I'll close in terms of, I just wanted to say one thing about Malcolm X and the fact that on August 20th, the Black is Back Coalition in the United States has called for actions against the, quote, other wars, that is, the U.S.-backed proxy wars in Africa, wars like the Sudan Somalia, the corporate backing in the Holocaust in the Congo.